This is part 28 of our Revelation series. That sounds absolutely insane to say. We're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 12. We're looking at the entire chapter tonight. We may revisit it next week, I don't know. This is kind of an overview of the chapter, but 26 pages is an overview. Sorry. we may call this okay and just move to 13. I've not decided yet. So anyway, a recap from lesson 27. So 27 was Revelation 11 verses 14 through 19, and in those verses the seventh trumpet sounded. And it wasn't to unleash another plague, but it triggered a heavenly proclamation of ultimate victory. Loud voices in heaven declared, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of His Christ, and He shall reign forever and ever." And the 24 elders fell in worship, giving thanks because God had taken His great power and begun to reign. And they announced the time had come for the dead to be judged, for the faithful to be rewarded, and for the destroyers of the earth to be destroyed. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, the ark of His covenant was revealed, and theophonic signs, theophonic just meaning signs of God, theo meaning God, lightning, thunder, earthquake, and hail, they all filled the scene. And the seventh trumpet did not describe the full execution of final judgment, but it announced what was about to unfold. And heaven declared the outcome before the final scenes played out in detail. So that was last time in Revelation. So where are we now? Well, Revelation 12 takes us backstage. After the seventh trumpet's grand announcement, we might expect an immediate cascade of bowl judgments, because that's what's coming next. Instead, John pulls back the curtain on the spiritual conflict that drives the visible story. This is something that we've been talking about all through this. There is a physical component to things, but there's also a spiritual component to things. And John does this quite often, where he describes the physical, but then he kind of pulls back the veil a little bit and lets us see the spiritual things that are going behind the physical. And that's what Revelation 12 is. So Revelation 12, we talked about this again, but just quickly to recap, you shouldn't read Revelation as just strictly chronological, like all these things happen in order in every chapter. That's not how it's written. That's not how we should perceive it. So this chapter is not chronological from 11. This is an explanatory chapter. This chapter explains what we've seen previously. And it shows us who the players are and what the war is really about and how the victory was secured. So remember, Revelation, the whole book, is about Jesus. It's about Jesus conquering and overcoming. It's about the defeat of the Satan. I'll talk about that. I know I've had questions. Why are you calling it the Satan? This is the chapter we talk about that. And so that's what Revelation is. And so we're getting glimpses of how all of this is happening. So in this chapter, we meet a woman clothed with the sun, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, a male child who will rule all nations, and a war in heaven that results in the dragon being thrown down to earth. We're introduced to the archenemy by multiple titles: the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, and the Satan. We see the connection between Genesis 3, the cross of Christ, the present persecution of the church, and the final defeat of evil. This is one of the most theologically dense and symbolically rich chapters in all of Scripture, in my opinion. And it requires us to think associatively, to trace Old Testament imagery, to understand Hebrew wordplay, and to see how spiritual rebellion and human rebellion are intertwined throughout the biblical story. So there's a structure to Revelation 12. It divides into 4 major movements. The first 6 verses is the woman and the dragon. A cosmic sign appears, and a woman giving birth and a dragon seeking to devour her child. The child is caught up to God's throne, and the woman flees into the wilderness. The verses 7 through 9 is the second part. That's the war in heaven. Michael and his angels fight the dragon and his angels. The dragon is defeated, thrown down to earth, and identified by 4 titles. The third movement is verses 10 through 12. There's a victory that's proclaimed, and there is a woe that is announced. So a loud voice in heaven declares victory through the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of the saints, but pronounces woe on the earth because the dragon has come down in great wrath. The fourth movement is in verses 13 through 17. That's the dragon's pursuit of the woman. The dragon persecutes the woman, but she is protected. Enraged, the dragon goes off to make war on the rest of her offspring. And the rest of her offspring are those who keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. All right, so why this matters? Revelation 12 answers the question, who is the real enemy? Who is the real enemy? It is not Rome. Remember, this was written at a time when Rome was persecuting the church. And I'm sure many of the readers might have, as John wrote it and sent it out to the churches, I'm sure many of them might have had Rome in mind. But here John is pulling back the curtain and he's saying, no, this is not Rome, really. This is not really about Rome. Rome is just a small piece in this. So it's not Rome. It's not any particular political system. It's not even human wickedness in general. The real enemy is a spiritual being in rebellion against God. He's called the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, and the Satan. But this chapter also announces the enemy's defeat. He has been cast down. His time is short. His accusations are nullified by the blood of the Lamb. And the faithful overcome him not by their own strength, but by holding fast to the testimony of Jesus, even if that means death. And this chapter integrates the entire biblical storyline of spiritual evil. The snake in Eden, which is Genesis 3, the sons of God in the Nephilim, Genesis 6, the rebellion of Babylon, Genesis 11, Isaiah 14, the persecution of God's people throughout history, the incarnation and the victory of Christ, and the final defeat of the powers of darkness. It shows us what that looks like. Shows us that what looks like political or social conflict on earth is actually the outworking of a cosmic rebellion that began before human history and will end with the return of Christ. So for believers that are living between the ascension of Jesus and the return of Jesus, that's us, this chapter, I think, should be both sobering and encouraging. Sobering because the dragon's wrath is real and he makes war on the saints. Encouraging because his defeat is certain and his time is limited, and our victory is secured not by our performance, but by the finished work of the Lamb. So we're going to walk through this chapter section by section. We'll look back at all the Old Testament echoes. We'll even examine a little bit of the Greek and Hebrew, unpack the symbolic imagery, and draw out the theological and practical implications for the church. So that was my very high-level overview. Here's where we get into debt. So the first 2 verses here. And remember, right, I've said I wanted to teach Revelation in a way that would not scare us. There are pieces in Revelation that are scary. That's just the reality. I don't want to hide it away. I don't want to sweep it under a rug, right? This is one of those chapters where it can be kind of scary, but hopefully at the end of it you won't be scared. You're going to be encouraged, because that's my goal. The enemy is real, but our God is real too, and He has conquered. So just kind of keep that in mind as we are reading through this. So Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. So a great sign appeared in heaven. That word sign, it indicates that what John sees is symbolic, not literal. A sign points beyond itself to a deeper reality. So this is not a literal woman floating in space, okay? She represents something or someone that is significant in God's redemptive plan. The word great emphasizes the importance of what is being revealed. And this is a major disclosure, what he's seeing. This is a great sign. So the sign appears in heaven, meaning it is a heavenly vision, not an earthly scene. John is seeing into the spiritual realm, into the theater where the real drama of history is being played out. We think that what we see around us is real, but I'm telling you, the spiritual stuff, the spiritual aspect is even more real than what we see. There are things that are happening that we can't comprehend, and we won't until we are there in heaven with Jesus. So next, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. So this imagery is cosmic, right? There's the stars, and it's also regal because of the crown. The woman is clothed with the sun. It's radiant, glorious, reflecting divine light. The moon is under her feet. She stands upon it, signifying authority or dominion. And on her head is a crown of 12 stars. The 12 stars, I believe, clearly point to the 12 tribes of Israel. This imagery goes all the way back to Genesis 37, verses 9 and 10, where Joseph dreams of the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. And his father Jacob interprets the sun and moon as representing himself and Joseph's mother, and the stars as Joseph's brothers, which would make up the 12 sons of Israel. The woman in Revelation 12 represents the people of God in their Old Testament form. Israel, the covenant community from whom the Messiah would come. She is not Mary individually, no matter what the Catholic Church wants to say. She is not Mary individually, though Mary is certainly included as part of this community. I can feel the hate messages coming. It's all right. The woman is the faithful remnant of Israel who brought forth the Messiah. Some interpreters see the woman as also representing the church, since the language in verse 17, which we'll read later, it speaks of the rest of her offspring who keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. The imagery may be fluid. I think that's probably how we're supposed to see this, encompassing both Israel in the giving birth to the Messiah and the church in the ongoing persecution and protection. I think the continuity is intentional. There is one people of God across both testaments. One people of God across both testaments. Next up, she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. So the language of birth pains is actually very common in the Old Testament, and it's a metaphor for suffering that leads to deliverance. Okay? So there's struggling, suffering, strife, but once we get through that, there is deliverance that happens at the end. And that is the metaphor that is it's just consistent throughout the Old Testament. Isaiah 66, verse 7 and 8 speaks of Zion giving birth before her labor pains come, bringing forth a nation in a single day. Micah 4:10 says, "Writhe and groan, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you shall go out from your city and dwell in the open country. You shall go to Babylon. There you shall be rescued. There the Lord," anytime you see Lord in all caps, it is Yahweh. "There Yahweh will redeem you from the hand of your enemies." The birth pains here signify the suffering and expectation of Israel as they awaited the coming of the Messiah. This was not a painless process. It involved centuries of oppression, exile, persecution, and longing. The prophets groaned for the consolation of Israel. The faithful remnant cried out for the redemption of Jerusalem. So this vision anchors the story of Revelation in the story of Israel. You cannot separate the two. Revelation is also the story of Israel. The conflict we are about to see is not new. It is the continuation of the conflict that began in Genesis 3, when God promised that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. That promise is now coming to fulfillment. The woman represents the people through whom the promised seed would come. And the dragon, as we will see, is the serpent of old seeking to destroy that seed. So the woman's suffering reminds us that God's redemptive plan often unfolds through pain. That's not a very pleasant thing to think about, but this is the reality. The coming of the Messiah was not a sudden, painless event. It was the result of centuries of faithful waiting, prophetic witness, and endurance under oppression. God's promises are sure, but the path to their fulfillment often involves groaning and labor. And we too live in the birth pains of the age to come. We groan inwardly as we wait for the redemption of our bodies and the consummation of the kingdom. That's what Paul tells us in Romans 8. But the labor is not in vain. The birth is coming. All right, the great red dragon, verses 3 and 4. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. So another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great dragon. So there's a second sign. First he sees the woman. Now he's seeing another second sign. And the parallel, it's as significant as the first sign. What he is seeing right now is just as significant as what he saw at first. The dragon is introduced with the same dramatic formula, behold, behold. That is a great thing for you to do, by the way, is to read through Revelation and just underline the word behold and see how many times it shows up, because it shows up a whole lot. That is one of the themes of Revelation. John just constantly says behold. And every time you see that word behold, just understand, John is saying, pay attention to this. This is important. And this is what he's just done right here. Behold, pay attention. The dragon is great. It's megas or megos in Greek. It is red. It's pyros in the Greek. The color red may symbolize bloodshed, violence, or wrath. Dragons in ancient mythology were often associated with chaos, destruction, and evil. In the Old Testament, the sea monster or dragon, or Leviathan, depending on the translation, it represents the forces of chaos and evil that oppose God's order. With 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. So the 7 heads and 10 horns reappear later in Revelation 13 and 17, and they're associated with the beast that rises from the sea. The imagery represents probably political and spiritual power. 7 heads suggest completeness of rule or dominion. 10 horns suggest power and authority. Horns are symbols of strength in the Old Testament. And the diadems are not victory wreaths. Okay, that's what the woman had on her head, was a victory wreath. This is a royal crown on the dragon. So the dragon claims kingship. He's seeking to rule. This is the same imagery used in Daniel 7, where beasts represent successive empires. The dragon is the spiritual power behind earthly kingdoms that oppose God. He is the prince of this world. That's how the New Testament describes him. And the God of this age. That's 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to earth. Stars are often symbolic of angels or spiritual beings in Scripture. See that in Job 38 and Revelation 1, verse 20. The sweeping down of a third of the stars suggests that the dragon led a rebellion among the heavenly host, and 1/3 of the angels followed him in his fall. This goes back to Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 15, where the king of Babylon, who is a figure for the spiritual power behind Babylon, the king of Babylon seeks to ascend to heaven. He wants to exalt his throne above the stars of God and make himself like the Most High, but is instead brought down to Sheol, or hell, as it's very often translated. It also echoes Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 19, where the king of Tyre is described as a guardian cherub in Eden who sinned and was cast out. The casting down of the stars is the original rebellion, the fall of Satan and the angels who followed him. So this is backstory. It happened before the events of Revelation 12 in the linear timeline, but John is showing it here to help us understand who the dragon is and what he has been doing. And we're going to talk about all these things in even more detail in just a little bit. The dragon stood before the woman who is about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. And this is the heart of the conflict. The dragon knows the prophecy of Genesis 3:15. He knows that the seed of the woman will crush his head. So he positions himself to destroy that seed as soon as it is born. This is not just symbolic. This is historical. Think of Pharaoh's order to kill all Hebrew male children. Right? Exodus 1. That was an attempt to destroy the deliverer Moses before he could rise. Think of Herod's slaughter of the innocents in Bethlehem, Matthew 2. That was an attempt to kill the newborn king of the Jews. Behind these human acts of violence was the dragon, seeking to devour the child who would crush him. So the dragon is introduced as a cosmic adversary with real power. He led a rebellion in heaven. He swept down a third of the angels. He stands ready to devour the promised Messiah, but his rebellion is not new. It goes all the way back to the garden. And his defeat is not uncertain. It was announced in Genesis 3:15. The dragon is powerful, but he isn't sovereign. He operates within limits set by God, and his end is already determined. So how do we apply this today? Well, we face a real enemy. He is not a metaphor. I just seen the latest, the name of it, just the State of Theology. It's an annual survey that they send out. 40% of self-proclaimed Christians do not believe in a literal Satan. 40% do not believe in a literal Satan. So he is not a metaphor. He is not just the personification of human sin. He is a spiritual being in rebellion against God, leading other spiritual beings and working through humans and their systems to oppose God's people and God's purposes. But he is not omnipotent, meaning he's not all-powerful. He is not omniscient, meaning he is not all-knowing. He is not sovereign. He is a created being under the authority of the Creator, and he has already been defeated at the cross. Any questions or comments before we move on? All right. The male child caught up to God's throne. This is verses 5 and 6. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she is a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So, breaking those two verses down, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with the rod of iron. The male child is Jesus Christ, the Messiah. That phrase, rule all nations with the rod of iron, it is a direct quotation from Psalm 2, verse 9, which is a messianic psalm that speaks of the Lord's anointed receiving the nations as his inheritance and ruling them with irresistible authority. So rod of iron does not mean cruelty. It means unbreakable. Okay? His rule will be unbreakable. It is a righteous rule. And a rod of iron cannot be bent or broken. Christ's reign will not be overthrown, ever. His authority will not be resisted. And this is fulfilled in his millennial reign, which we'll talk about probably a year from now when we get to Revelation 19. And ultimately in the eternal kingdom, which we'll see in Revelation 22. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And this phrase compresses the entire earthly ministry of Jesus into a single statement. There is no mention of his birth in Bethlehem, his teaching, his miracles, his crucifixion, or his resurrection. Why? Because the focus here is not on his earthly ministry, but on the spiritual conflict. The dragon sought to devour the child. He failed. The child was caught up. That's the same word used in 1 Thessalonians for the rapture. Just thought that was interesting. Just means to be snatched away. So he was caught up to God and to his throne. And this refers to the ascension of Christ, which you can read about in Acts 1. Jesus completed his work of redemption on the cross. He rose victorious from the grave, and he ascended to the right hand of the Father, where he now reigns. The dragon's plan failed. The seed of the woman was not devoured. He crushed the serpent's head and now sits enthroned in heaven. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So the woman, now representing the believing remnant of Israel and the church, flees into the wilderness. This again goes right back to Israel's flight into the wilderness after the Exodus and Elijah's flight into the wilderness where he was fed by ravens. The wilderness is a place of both testing and protection. Testing and protection. It is not comfortable, but it is safe. I'm just going to let that sink in just a little bit, because none of us want to go through the wilderness, because it is testing and it is not comfortable. But it is safe. The wilderness is safe. God has prepared a place for her. She is nourished, supplied, sustained, cared for by God Himself. The period of 1,260 days is the same as the 42 months and the times, and half a time that's mentioned elsewhere in Revelation and Daniel. It represents the period of tribulation, the time of the dragon's wrath on earth, the time of the church's witness and suffering. It is a limited, defined period. God sets the boundaries. The dragon cannot extend it. So the birth, ascension, and enthronement of Christ are the central events of history. All of history is centered on the birth, ascension, and enthronement of Christ. Every bit of human history is centered in that. They mark the turning point in the cosmic conflict that had been going on. The dragon's defeat was secured at the cross and ratified at the ascension. Now the dragon is enraged and pursues the woman, the people of God, but she is protected. The wilderness is not abandonment, it is refuge. God has prepared a place. He will sustain His people through the time of tribulation. So Christ is enthroned. He has already won. This is the foundation of our hope. No matter how fierce the dragon's attacks, no matter how dark the circumstances, the outcome is settled. The Lamb who was slain is on the throne. He rules all nations with a rod of iron, and we are hidden in Him, nourished by Him, sustained by Him through the wilderness of this present age.
That the laws of Israel will be back in place, and they wasn't allowed to walk or to go very far on that Sabbath day. That Petra, that is a place in Jordan, they think that's where they will go to be protected.
Yeah.
For that, and it's strange because He does it spiritually, but He could also protect
of them
too, literally.
Oh yeah,
by doing that.
For sure, yeah. All right, section 4, war in heaven, the Satan unmasked and defeated, verses 7 through 9. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. All right, let's break that down. Now war rose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. That word now, it's a narrative transition. John is showing us what happens in the spiritual realm following the ascension of the male child. A war breaks out, not a new war, but the culmination of an ancient conflict that has been simmering since the garden. Michael is introduced as the leader of the heavenly forces. His name in Hebrew is Michael, which means who is like God. The name itself is a rebuke to the dragon's prideful claim to equality with God. Because that's what the dragon wants, right? The dragon wants to be equal with God, and Michael's very name, who is like God, is rebuke to the dragon's desire. Because the very question, who is like God, it answers itself. No one is like God. Not the dragon, not the rebel angels, not any created being. God alone is God. And this is not a battle of equals, all right? Now, man, every time I talk about this, I want to drive this point home. This is not a battle of equals. The Satan is not equal with God. There is no fight at all. God could destroy the dragon with a word, but He chooses to use His created servants, which is in this case Michael and the angels, to execute judgment. And this mirrors the biblical pattern where God works through His servants to accomplish His purposes. I don't know why that's the primary means that the Lord uses to accomplish His purposes, but it's us and angels. But it's, just as He uses the church to proclaim the gospel and advance His kingdom on earth, He uses His holy angels to enforce His will in the spiritual realm. The dragon and his angels fought back. They mounted a resistance. They did not surrender, but their resistance was futile. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. That word "but" marks the decisive turn. The dragon fought, but he was defeated. And this is the language of decisive defeat. The dragon and his angels are not merely just pushed back, they are expelled. There is no longer any place, any topos for them in heaven. That word place can mean a physical location, a position, or a role. I believe all three of those are in view here. The dragon no longer has access to the heavenly throne room. He no longer has standing to accuse the saints before God. He no longer belongs in the presence of the Holy One. So there's a fourfold unmasking. Who is this being, this spiritual being? So verse 9 pulls together the entire biblical storyline of spiritual rebellion and identifies the dragon by four distinct titles. Each title reveals a different facet of his identity, his tactics, and his history. John does not give him a proper name. He is not given a proper name. I'll talk about that more in just a bit, but just know that there is never a proper name given to this spiritual rebel. If you've not picked it up, Satan is not a name. That's one of the things that I'm trying to say. Instead, John assigns him a mosaic of images and roles that show us who he is and what he does. So the first is the great dragon. The dragon is the chaos monster, the beast from the deep. He's the symbol of violent opposition to God's created order. So God, He creates order out of chaos. The dragon seeks to drag order back into chaos. In ancient Near Eastern mythology, the dragon or sea serpent represented the forces of chaos that the gods had to subdue in order to create the world. The Old Testament draws on this imagery, but it transforms it. There is no cosmic battle between equal powers. Yahweh is sovereign. He created the sea monsters. He controls Leviathan. He will slay the dragon in the end. Isaiah 27:1, in that day, Yahweh with His hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and He will slay the dragon that is in the sea. So the dragon in Revelation is the embodiment of anti-creation. He seeks to drag God's good world back into chaos, darkness, and death. He is the force behind violence, disorder, and destruction. He is the destroyer. He hates what God has made and seeks to unmake it. But the dragon is not sovereign. He is a creature. He was created good as one of the cherubim. Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 15, describes the king of Tyre as an anointed guardian cherub in Eden, beautiful and wise, who became corrupt through pride and violence. I've got those verses down there that you can read. I'm not going to read them just to kind of save us some time, but I encourage you to read those. And so that passage in Ezekiel, like the passage in Isaiah 14, 12 through 15, is a dual reference. It speaks of a human king on one level, but it points beyond him to the spiritual power behind the throne. The dragon was once a high-ranking angelic being in God's service, but he rebelled, he fell, and he became the great dragon, the embodiment of chaos and rebellion. The second way John describes this rebel is by calling him that ancient serpent. I thought this was interesting. The word ancient, it's archaeos in the Greek, where we get our word archaic from. But it means from the beginning or original. So this is the serpent of Eden, the one who deceived Eve in Genesis 3. This is a massive theological claim. John is saying that the conflict in Revelation 12 is the same conflict that began in Genesis 3. The serpent who tempted the woman, and by the way, I think we all probably know this, or we believe this anyway, but have you ever wondered why you believe that? If somebody asks you, how can you connect the dragon in Revelation to the serpent in the garden, how would you be able to respond? Well, this is how you respond. But so many of us have just kind of been, this stuff has been said to us, but it's never really been explained and defended. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. So this is the same conflict that began in Genesis 3. The serpent who tempted the woman in the garden is the dragon who seeks to devour the woman in Revelation. The enemy has not changed. The tactics have not changed. The goal has not changed. From the beginning, the serpent has sought to undermine God's word, corrupt God's people, and prevent the coming of the promised seed. In Genesis 3:1, the serpent is described as arum in the Hebrew, arum. I thought this was very interesting, but I'm a word nerd, Bible nerd. Somebody needs to make me a mug that has Bible nerd on it. I'd set it on the pulpit every time I go to preach. I don't know that I would do that, but I'd do it at least once. At least once. So that the serpent is described as arum, and I just want you to kind of have that in mind. I'm saying that for a reason. That word arum in the Hebrew, it just means crafty or shrewd or perceptive. And I think most translations have it as crafty. And I think that word crafty, maybe not for you all, but when I hear that word crafty, it's not really a positive thing for me. Someone who is crafty, it's almost like they're sneaky or something. Yeah, deception. But that's not really the way that it's supposed to be understood. Arum is a good thing. We're actually told in Proverbs that we're supposed to be arum. We're supposed to be shrewd, perceptive. It's actually like wise is really kind of what it means. So this was not a negative trait initially. So the serpent was actually good. He was wise, and he was perceptive. I want us to get this, okay?
It helped him manipulate.
Yeah, it did. It helped him manipulate, yeah. But, my point is, he was created good. The reason he was in the garden was because at the moment, while he was in the garden, he was still good. But in the garden is when he made that choice and he fell. And so, if you've ever wondered why was the serpent allowed in the garden, well, he was good while he was in the garden. That's why he was. He was a cherubim. And we know there were other cherubim in the garden as well. When Adam and Eve were kicked out, there were cherubim placed at the entrance to the garden to make sure they didn't come back in. So, to me, this just makes a lot of sense on why this spiritual rebel was allowed in. He wasn't a rebel yet. The rebellion occurred in the garden. That's my belief. And I think the Scripture kind of...
He was created with a purpose, but he perverted that purpose.
Yes, exactly.
I thought that he was cast down in a third of the angels before. Pardon me.
That's what I was always taught, but it never says when he was cast down.
That's true.
It never says that. I believe in the garden is when that happened. I believe that's when that spiritual rebellion happened. Now,
Because he deceived, though. He deceived her in the garden.
yeah,
So I just took it that he was already evil, or he wouldn't have done that.
yeah. But, he's described as wise, and it's a good
He
trait.
had to be in
Yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah.
So he was like traveling back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But when the fall happened, is when he was expelled from heaven.
Yeah.
He couldn't go back.
That's how I always looked at it, when mankind
He couldn't go back.
he fell.
It wasn't allowed back in.
Well, no, when he's actually expelled and can't go back is when Christ ascends. There's the original fall, but he's still allowed back after the fall. We know that because we're told that in Job,
Yeah, or he can go right.
where he's
Well, he was cast to earth, basically.
But he
Yeah.
could still go back and forth.
yeah. But when Christ ascends, right, when he is crucified and died and resurrected, and again, kind of talk about that a little bit too. But I believe that is when he is actually expelled, and when that war with Michael that we just read, when that happened was at the, I think the cross of Christ was actually this major spiritual battle that we just had no idea that was going on. And in that moment is when he was expelled, because from that moment he is no longer able to accuse us because we were washed in the blood of the Lamb. So, but until then, he was still the accuser. He shows up many times in the Old Testament accusing. He goes to God to accuse Job. Again, we'll talk about all this. This is coming up. So, but yeah, that's what I think the timeline is. All right, I think there was the original fall that happened in the garden, and you feel free to disagree with me on this. The Bible does not say that clearly, but I think that explains why the serpent was in the garden to begin with, because at the time he was a good cherubim, and he was there with other good cherubim from God. And in that moment, he rebelled, brought humanity into rebellion along with him, and that was the initial fall. And then the battle between Michael and the angels versus the dragon and his angels, that happened when Jesus ascended and put his blood on the ark in heaven. Because no longer was there any way for the accuser to accuse the children of God. And so, because we are forever covered by his blood, the accuser no longer has a place in heaven. There's no purpose at all for him to even be in heaven, so he's immediately expelled and he's cast down to earth.
So he has no way of going before God anymore to accuse, and that's the reason Jesus is our advocate.
Yes.
He has to go through Jesus,
Yes.
no longer directly to the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Well, I've heard that before and read a little on it, but it was saying that the purpose of his falling away was due to Adam
Mm.
and God's love toward Adam and jealousy.
Mm. I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Right.
You know,
I mean, he is jealous
Because, I
God's
mean-
love for us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he is, that's why he hates us.
Yeah.
what would cause an angel to rebel against God?
Yeah.
You know, and that was what they were saying, that was the purpose, because of his love that he had toward Adam and the jealousy over is what caused him to rebel against the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that the Bible doesn't say that. We are told, one thing for sure, this rebel wanted to be like God.
Yes.
Like, we know that is one thing for sure, that he wanted to be equal with Yahweh. And was that his only sin? I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
we don't really have all that.
right, yeah.
We don't really have a true name for it.
No,
Yeah.
no, we don't.
Two angels, not only there we only know of, that actually
Yeah.
called by name.
Yeah.
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 I always thought he saw an opportunity to realize,
Mm.
instead of seeing what would happen to him, seeing everything like God does, he saw the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, as an opportunity to get power, to gain power.
Could have been, yeah.
That's how I was.
Yeah, could have been. All right, so he is described as Arum. He is wise and perceptive. This was not a negative trait initially. The serpent was one of the cleverest of God's creatures, but he used his wisdom for rebellion. He twisted God's words. He questioned God's goodness. He promised the woman that she could be like God, knowing good and evil. That is the same thing that he wanted. He wanted to be like God. And this was the original lie, that created beings can ascend to equality with God, that we can define good and evil for ourselves, that we do not need to submit to God's authority. Well, the serpent, as we know, succeeded. The woman ate, Adam ate, and the world fell into sin and death. But God immediately pronounced judgment on the serpent and announced the gospel promise in Genesis 3, verses 14 and 15. I'll go ahead and read that. So again, the Lord, in all caps, Yahweh, said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So the serpent goes from being the craftiest, which is Arum, to the most cursed, which is Arur. So there's Hebrew wordplay that's going on, which again I think is an indication that the serpent went from being good to now he is evil. He was good and now he is cursed. He went from Arum to Arur. And then there is a promise that is made. This is, the Latin term is proto-evangelium, just means the first gospel. It announces a cosmic conflict between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. It promises that the woman's seed will crush the serpent's head, though the serpent will strike his heel. And this prophecy finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. He is the seed of the woman, born of a virgin with no human father. He is the one who crushes the serpent's head through his death and resurrection. The serpent struck his heel at the cross, but that strike became the very means of the serpent's defeat. Revelation 12 shows us the fulfillment of Genesis 3:15. The dragon, the ancient serpent, seeks to devour the male child, the seed of the woman, but the child is caught up to God's throne. The dragon is cast down and his head is crushed. And this ancient prophecy is fulfilled. By calling the dragon that ancient serpent, John is telling us that this is not a new enemy. This is the original rebel. The one who introduced sin into the world, the one who deceived humanity, the one whose head was promised to be crushed, and now in Revelation 12 we see that crushing taking place. The third way that John describes him is as the devil, or in the Greek it's diablos, which means to throw cross or to slander. Again, devil is not a name. Devil literally means slanderer. The devil is the slanderer, the one who spreads lies and false accusations, and this is his primary mode of operation. He does not just oppose God through brute force, he opposes God through deception, distortion, and defamation. The devil slanders God to humanity. In the garden, he said to Eve, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" That's Genesis 3:1. God had said they could eat of every tree except one. So notice the serpent's words. Did God say you couldn't eat of any tree? Well, no, actually God had said you can eat of every tree but one. But the devil twisted the command to make God seem restrictive and withholding. Then he said, you will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The serpent portrayed God as a liar and a jealous tyrant who wants to keep humanity from reaching their full potential. This was slander. It was a deliberate misrepresentation of God's character and His motives. The devil also slanders humanity to God. He accuses the saints day and night before our God. In Job 1, verses 9 through 11, Satan accuses Job of serving God only for personal gain. Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, then he'll curse you to your face. The accusation is that Job's faithfulness is mercenary, not genuine. Mercenary meaning it was kind of for sale. His faithfulness was just because of what he was gaining from God. So the devil's accusations are relentless. He points out every failure, every inconsistency, every sin. He demands judgment. He insists that we deserve condemnation, and he is right. We do deserve condemnation because our sins are real and our guilt is real. The accusations are factually accurate. But the blood of the Lamb is greater than the accusations of the devil. Paul asks a question in Romans 8, verse 33 and 34. Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. The devil can accuse, but the judge has already declared us righteous. The blood of Christ has answered every charge. The verdict is final, not guilty, clothed in the righteousness of Christ. When the dragon is cast down in Revelation 12, his access to the heavenly throne room is revoked. He can no longer stand before God to accuse the saints. His voice is silenced. His accusations fall on deaf ears. The advocate has spoken, and the case is closed. Now here's something very important. The word diablos, the devil, is not unique to this spiritual being. Paul uses the same word to describe human gossips and slanderers. So if you gossip and slander, you are a devil. That's what Paul says. In 1 Timothy 3:11, he warns that women serving as deacons must be dignified, not slanderers or diablos or devils, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. In 2 Timothy 3:3, he lists slanderers among the characteristics of people in the last days. In Titus 2:3, older women are instructed not to be slanderers or devils. This means the devil is not the only devil. Humans can play that role too. When we spread false accusations, gossip, slander, or misrepresent others, we are acting as devils. We are imitating the enemy. This is a sobering warning. The tongue is a fire set aflame by hell. That's what James 3, verse 6 tells us. We must guard our speech and refuse to participate in the work of the slanderer. All right, the fourth way John describes this rebel is as the Satan. In the Greek, it's satanas. It is a transliteration of the Hebrew, which is Satan. And Satan just means adversary or opponent. Again, it's not a name. In the Old Testament, the word Satan, without the definite article, meaning the Satan. So in the Old Testament, there is Satan, and then there is the Satan. And I'll talk about that. But that word just by itself, Satan, it's even used to describe human adversaries. In 1 Kings 11:14, then chapter 23 and chapter 25, God raises up adversaries, or Satans, against Solomon. They were political enemies who oppose his reign. In Numbers 22:22, the angel of Yahweh stands in the road as an adversary, or as Satan, to Balaam, blocking his path. But when the word appears with the definite article, the Satan, it refers to a specific spiritual being, always in the Old Testament. Always, the Satan is one individual. It is this specific rebel. It is the cosmic opponent of God and His people. This is how the word is used in Job and also in Zechariah. In Job 1:6-12, the sons of God, which is the heavenly council, they present themselves before the Lord, before Yahweh, and the Satan comes among them. And Yahweh asks, "From where have you come?" And the Satan answers, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it." He is a roaming accuser, a prosecutor looking for evidence against the faithful. And Yahweh points to Job as a blameless and upright man. So the Satan responds with accusation. Job only serves God because of the blessings. Remove the blessings and Job will curse God. So Yahweh permits the Satan to test Job, but He sets limits. He may not take Job's life. The Satan brings devastating loss and suffering, but Job does not curse God. So the Satan's accusation is proven false. The word Satan is a title, not a proper name. And this is crucial. Giving this being a personal name assigns him a dignity and honor that the biblical authors deliberately withhold. Throughout Scripture, this enemy is described by his function and his character: adversary, accuser, deceiver, destroyer, tempter, evil one, prince of this world, even God of this age. But he is never given a personal name like Michael or Gabriel. He is always the adversary, the accuser, the slanderer. This is why in Greek the word always appears with the definite article. The Satan, the adversary. Jesus uses it this way. The apostles use it this way, and John is using it here in Revelation 12, verse 9. Modern English translations often drop the article and render it simply as Satan. I do not know why they decided to do this. I think it has confused things. And that makes it sound like a proper name, but the Greek and Hebrew are clear. This is a title. He is the opponent, the one who stands against God and His people. And why does this matter? All right? Isaiah, you've been talking about this. Why in the world does this matter? Because it reminds us that this being is defined entirely by his rebellion. He has no identity apart from his opposition to God. He is not an equal and opposite force. He is not the dark counterpart to a light deity. He is a creature, a fallen creature, whose entire existence is now characterized by adversarial hostility to the Creator. He is the Satan, the adversary, and that is all he will ever be. It's all he will ever be. So he's the deceiver of the whole world. A deceiver means one who leads astray or one who causes to wander. The dragon's primary weapon is not physical violence, it is deception. I'm going to try to get through this section and then we'll call it a night because it's already 10 after. The dragon's primary weapon is not physical violence, it is deception. He deceived Eve in the garden. He deceives the nations. He masquerades as an angel of light. He spreads lies, twists truth, distorts reality, and leads people away from God. That phrase, the whole world, emphasizes the scope of his deception. It is not limited to one nation or one people group. It is global. Every culture, every religion, every ideology that rejects the truth of God and the gospel of Jesus Christ is, in some measure, under the influence of the deceiver. Every other religion out there, I know the world wants to say that, all religions lead to God. They don't. There's one religion that leads to God. And, that's very exclusive. Jesus is the one who made it exclusive. Jesus is the one that said, I am the way. And nobody comes to the Father except by me. That's Jesus' own words. He said, I am the door. Right? Jesus made it exclusive. But it's also very inclusive because it's for everyone who will just make Him Lord. That's it. 1 John 5:19 says, we know that we are from God and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. That word lies, it means it's situated or rests in. The world system, its values, its priorities, its rebellion against God, it's under the sway of the evil one. And what this does not mean is that every individual is directly controlled by the devil. It means the world system as a whole is organized in opposition to God and influenced by the powers of darkness. Ephesians 2, verses 1 through 3 describes unbelievers as dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. So we used to follow after the Satan, even if we were doing it unknowingly, but now we are dead to that. Now we are brought to life in a new way. But deception can be overcome. Jesus said in John 8, verse 32, you will know the truth will set you free. The gospel is the antidote to the dragon's lies. When the Holy Spirit opens our eyes, we see through the deception. We recognize the lies for what they are. We turn from darkness to light, from the power of the Satan to God. All right. He was thrown down to the earth and his angels were thrown down with him. That verb, thrown down, it's repeated 3 times in verses 9 and 10. This is emphatic. The dragon was thrown down. His angels were thrown down. The accuser was thrown down. The language is violent. It is forceful. It is final. This is not a gentle removal. This is expulsion, exile, banishment. The dragon does not leave voluntarily. He is cast out. He is defeated in battle and expelled from heaven by force. Michael and his angels enforce the sentence. The dragon and his angels are stripped of their heavenly access and they're confined to the earthly realm. This is not yet the final judgment. That comes in Revelation 20, when the devil is thrown into the lake of fire and tormented day and night forever and ever. Here in chapter 12, the dragon is cast down to the earth, where he will rage for a short time before his final doom. So when did this happen? We can kind of, the timing of the dragon's defeat. I'll read this because this was the this was the thing that we just talked about. And then we'll call it after I read this. There are 3 main interpretive options for when the war in heaven and the casting down of the dragon took place. I have my belief. Feel free to disagree. All right, this is not something that we divide over if you don't agree with me. So, if you look at commentaries, most of them propose one of these 3. 1, the original fall of the Satan before the creation of humanity. Some interpreters see Revelation 12, 7 through 9 as describing the original rebellion of Satan, often linked to Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. And in this view, the dragon's fall happened in the distant past, before Genesis 3. The serpent in the garden was already a fallen being. This view has merit, especially given the reference to the dragon sweeping down a third of the stars of heaven, which seems to describe an angelic rebellion. However, the context of Revelation 12 places the war in heaven after the ascension of the male child. So to me, this suggests a later event. The second way that this is kind of interpreted, the cross, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. Many interpreters see the war in heaven as the spiritual reality accomplished by the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. This view is supported by several key texts. Luke 10, 17 and 18, the 72 return with joy, saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And Jesus responds, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." John 12, 31 and 32, Jesus says, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." The lifting up refers to his crucifixion. The cross is the moment when the ruler of this world is judged and cast out. John 16:11, Jesus says the Spirit will convict the world concerning judgment because the ruler of this world is judged. Colossians 2:15, Paul writes, "He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Him." And again, he's referring to the cross. Hebrews 2:14 and 15, that through death He might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who, through fear of death, were subject to lifelong slavery. These texts all point to the cross as the decisive defeat of the dragon. At the cross, Jesus absorbed the full wrath of God against sin. He bore the curse. He died, and then He rose, victorious over sin, death, and the devil. His resurrection was His vindication. His ascension was His coronation. And His enthronement at the right hand of the Father marked the beginning of His reign and the dragon's expulsion from heaven. In this view, the war in heaven is the spiritual reality that corresponds to the earthly events of the cross and ascension. The dragon's accusations are nullified by the blood of the Lamb. His access to the heavenly throne room as the accuser of the brethren is revoked. He is cast down to earth, where he rages for a limited time before his final judgment. I believe this is the most contextually grounded reading. Revelation 12:5 says the male child was caught up to God and to His throne. This is the ascension. Immediately following, war breaks out in heaven. The dragon is defeated and cast down. A loud voice proclaims, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of His Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down." And the timing, to me, seems clear. The defeat of the dragon happens after the ascension of Christ. There is a third way to interpret this as a future event at the midpoint of the tribulation. Some dispensational interpreters see the war in heaven as a future event that will occur during the 7-year tribulation, at the midpoint when the Antichrist is revealed and the Great Tribulation begins. So in this view, the 1,260 days of the woman's protection in the wilderness correspond to the second half of the tribulation. This view is possible, but it faces challenges. If the dragon has not yet been cast down, then his accusations are still valid. And the salvation announced in verse 10 of chapter 12 has not yet come. But the New Testament consistently presents the cross and resurrection as the decisive defeat of the powers of darkness. To place the dragon's expulsion in the future seems to undermine the already aspect of Christ's victory. All right, so we'll call it, it's 20 after. I'm so sorry. Any questions or comments before we go? You still got a few pages. Read them, please. I put a lot of work into them. Please go on to read them.